The good old 90s are back, you guys. Well, not exactly good old, because I'm about to go into 10 gruesome, horrible stories that took place during the 90s, but I mean, considering how 2020 is going, I don't even want to guess which decade is going to end up being worse. This year has been bad enough already, you guys. Let's be honest with ourselves. What is up, you guys? Hope you're having an awesome day. I'm your host, Ayman Hassan, and welcome back to another video. I'm glad you guys are enjoying this series so much, because honestly, so am I. Before I get into it, remember to check out our comedy channel, Top 10 Central. I am on it. Joss and Jared are on it, and so is Landon, and I feel like we have some pretty fun times, and I feel like y'all are gonna need some comic relief after this one. But without further ado, these are the top 10 true scary stories from the 90s part 3. We've made it to part 3. Starting us off with number 10 is Rosie Tapia part 1, August 13th, 1995. Loeen Tapia and her husband had just gotten home to their Salt Lake City apartment after a date night. Their 3 kids were asleep since their eldest 18-year-old Amelia had been babysitting them. At 2 a.m. everybody was home, but by 5:45 a.m. Loeen went to check in on them again to find their door closed, which it never was. But by 5:45 a.m. Loeen went to check in on them again to find their door closed, which it never was. Her second child, 6-year-old Rosie, was missing, and someone had clearly taken her. The window was ajar, the screen was gone, and the blinds were heavily damaged. Loeen immediately woke everyone up, called the police, and the search began. Rosie's 4-year-old little brother claimed a bearded man was in his room and had told him to go back to sleep. During interviews, police found out something key from Amelia about the day before. She had taken Rosie to the playground and left her there to play on her own. But around 7:30 p.m. an unknown man knocked on the door with Rosie in his arms. He claimed that she had been kicked by another kid on the slide, but he seemed overly nervous and kept stuttering. When he left, Rosie revealed that she hadn't been hurt at the playground at all, and she had no idea how the man knew her name. So already, guys, things are suspicious, like who the hell is that dude? Coming in at number 9 is Rosie Tapia part 2. The next morning at around 10 a.m, a jogger found the body of a small girl in the Jordan River Canal. The body was Rosie's, and she was fully clothed, and initially investigators reported that she had wandered off and drowned. Autopsy results showed that the trauma her body sustained were consistent with rape and drowning, meaning he had drowned her before raping her. So now we are looking for a pedophilic murderer. Amelia's description of the unknown man led more witnesses to come forward, saying he'd been sitting on the playground bench, just watching the kids, not even supervising a child of his own. The man wasn't found despite the DNA that was recovered from under Rosie's fingernails, so the case is still unsolved. At number 8, we have SHERRI PEARSON, September 12th, 1993. Firefighters rushed to a house on fire located on Garden Street, Kendallville, Indiana. SHERRI's neighbor saw smoke pouring from the windows of the house and promptly called the police. By the time firefighters got there, the house had already been ablaze for 45 minutes already, and upon entering, they found 27-year-old SHERRI PEARSON dead in the living room. Now, thankfully, her 2 children were visiting their dad at the time, since the couple had separated a few months prior, but were apparently trying to work things out. Now, the case was originally ruled as an accident, blaming faulty wiring for the fire starting, but that wasn't the case. Investigators realized the fire started in the bedroom, and some type of accelerant had been poured all over the bedroom, as well as in other spots around the house. So this was now a case of arson, and more importantly, homicide. The batteries on the fire alarm had also been removed, meaning that they were never going to save her. Autopsy results showed that SHERRI had been injected with some unknown foreign substance before her death. Officers concluded she had been drugged before the fire was set, but the culprit was never found. Filling at number 7 slot is NICOLA PAYNE, December 14th, 1991. 18-year-old NICOLA was going to the shops to pick up some clothes for her son. The walk from her boyfriend's house to her parents was quite short and should have taken her around 10 minutes, even in super bad conditions. But somehow, out of nowhere, she just vanished. Even sniffer dogs and helicopters could find zero trace of NICOLA, but one anonymous man apparently could. He kept calling the Payne family, claiming he saw a man carrying a drunk individual along that road. The case went cold for another 5 years, despite a lot of excavation having taken place. 2 men were arrested for the murder, but both had been found not guilty due to lack of evidence. What's important to not forget here is that sex worker Barbara Finn also disappeared around the same time NICOLA did, and both had pretty similar physical features. Authorities hypothesized it could have been Scottish serial killer Peter Tobin, but again, zero evidence. Now at number 6 is Claire Morrison, December 19th, 1992. This one's a tough one because there are so many conflicting stories of what she was doing the night before she died. On the 18th, 13-year-old Claire Morrison was at Geelong Mall in Australia, and she told her friend she was going to catch the bus home to get some money, but that's the last time they would ever see her alive. Witnesses claim they saw Claire drunk walking around town, and 18-year-old Shane McLaren told police he saw her getting into a blue car with 2 men, which later turned out to be a complete lie. Claire's brother Andrew said her and her friends went to the cliffs that overlooked Bell Beach, but she failed to leave with them when they left. The next morning, her body was found near the beach in horrific condition. She had been strangled, beaten, she had neck and head injuries, and had also been mangled by a shark, hence the exact cause of death could not be found. Since Shane was the only one who was linked to the case and who had also lied about it, he was automatically the number 1 suspect, and the fact she was addicted to crystal meth just didn't help his case at all. Regardless, someone did hurt Claire before throwing her into the water to be left dead for sharks, but we just don't know who it was. Coming in at number 5 are the Rocks, August 27th, 1991. 28-year-old Marcia Gippin and her friend Stanley were driving west on the I-70 to pick up her 2 daughters who were staying with her parents. As the two went under the Manhattan Road underpass in Putnam County, Indiana, 2 huge rocks, both heavier than 15 pounds each, were thrown on them from the overpass. The first rock broke through her windshield, hitting Marcia in the head, killing her instantly. The second one bounced off the hood and hit Stanley, but he somehow managed to stop the car. As he was trying to stop other cars for help, another 2 rocks were thrown over, hitting a truck driven by 23-year-old Kimberly Shuttler. The rock shattered the leg of her passenger James, but she was thankfully uninjured. James and Stanley were airlifted to a hospital, but Marcia ended up being killed due to multiple critical injuries. Witnesses claim they saw 2 males in their teens getting away from the overpass in a dark truck, but the worst part of all of this was that this wasn't even an isolated incident. It had happened a lot in the months leading up to August, and 7 other motorists had reported the incidents. The kids that were responsible for the deaths were never found or brought to justice. At number 4 is Diane Augat, April 10th, 1998. Around Good Friday, a Florida woman called Diane Augat was reported missing by her mum. Her mum went on to say Diane suffered from addiction and mental illness and was drawn to and easily trusting of men, especially men with money. Now, it's still up in the air whether she left on purpose because of a man or whether it was actually an abduction. A few days after her disappearance, she left a worrying message on her mum's answering phone. In the message, she screams, "Help, help," before you hear a sound of some sort of scuffle, and then someone else saying, "Hey, gimme that," before the message ends. She tried calling back, but there was no answer. So at this point, okay, it sounds like she's being held hostage by this man, or maybe this was a romantic situation gone very wrong. 2 days later, the tip of Diane's middle finger was found on the side of the road she'd been seen walking down. A week later, her clothes were found folded in a bag and disposed of in the freezer of a random convenience store. Totally normal location to do that. Another bag filled with her makeup was found in another store, and it was labelled Diane. Again, the case was just never solved, but I have a feeling that Diane is dead, based off the fact that someone had cut off her fingers and taken her clothes. Filling at number 3 slot is the British Millionaire, December 10th, 1996. 54-year-old millionaire Richard Watson was on his way home, and as soon as he entered his property, he heard a gunshot. His stepdaughter claimed he said, "No, no, get away from me, not again, leave me alone, get away from me." When she finally stepped outside, she saw that Richard had been shot in the neck twice by a man wearing joggers. 6 months later, his wife Linda and daughter Amanda were arrested in a sting operation at Gatwick Airport for the murder of Richard. The police were convinced the two had hired a hitman to kill him. In the months leading up to his murder, he'd been visited by 2 men outside his family home. There had been 2 break-ins at his office, and a man had even been caught writing down his number plate. Maybe Linda and Amanda wanted the money but didn't want the blame, so they hired a hitman. People always have some kind of beef with rich people anyway, so maybe it was just someone who Richard had wronged. We don't know. Now at number 2 is Carmen VANHUSS, March 22nd, 1990. 19-year-old Indianapolis local Carmen Hope VANHUSS was on her way back from the hospital after visiting her sick grandma. She dropped off her brother and dad before going home to her own apartment and arriving at around 11 p.m. Neighbors saw her with a man talking and laughing going towards her apartment. At around 1 or 1:30 a.m., neighbors heard her shouting, get off me," followed by footsteps leaving the apartment. Instead of calling the police like any normal person, the neighbors called the landlord and a noise complaint notice was just left on her door. I'm pretty sure if I heard my neighbor shouting, "Get off me," I would not call the landlord, I would bloody call the police. Then the next morning, after failing to show up to her shift at work, her manager was worried and alerted Carmen's dad, James. James had also been trying to reach Carmen's phone, but with no result, he went to her apartment. There, he found her door unlocked and the whole apartment in utter chaos. Carmen's partially clothed, stabbed body was on the floor, and it looked like she had also been Nothing was stolen and all her exes were interviewed, but they had all been out of state at the time of the crime. Her case remains cold. And finally, at number 1 is Norway's most well-known murder, May 6, 1995. 17-year-old Birgitte Teng's body was found dead in a bush by the side of a dirt road. The night before, Birgitte traveled to downtown Kopervik, and right before midnight, she hiked a ride to the city. Eyewitnesses remembered seeing her walking down the main street, but that was the last live sighting of her. Her body was found with her stockings at her ankles, her dress pulled up, and her head was almost completely smashed open. The weapon, a 23-kilogram bloody rock, was found next to her. Further investigation showed she had been dragged to the location before being raped and killed only 400 meters away from her own home. The first break in the case was the blonde hair that she was found clutching. That was not hers. The police spent ages trying to find a long-haired blonde man before DNA testing came back again, saying the hair actually was hers. The biggest suspect in the case was her cousin, who was seen acting extremely weird during her funeral. He also had a history of inappropriately touching a girl and public exposure. After being interrogated for 180 hours, he ended up confessing but later took it back. He won the case due to lack of evidence, and her killer is still at large. And I mean, you guys, we've seen so many cases where someone, after being interrogated for literally days on end, will just confess because they think they've done it when they actually haven't, and they're just in a state of delirium. And that could have very well been Birgitte's cousin. And that is it for today's video, guys. I keep thinking I'm gonna run out of cases to talk about in this series, but I'm just not, and that's simultaneously exciting for me, but also just heartbreaking. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments below. As always, I'm your host, Ayman Hassan, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.